we are undermining the beauty that is right here, right now, simply because we're not willing to be vulnerable and messy and human. But my God, that is that is the very definition of being human.
Welcome to Intuition Unlocked. This podcast is for women who are craving a deeper return to who they are. Maybe you've lost your spark a little, or feel unsure of your next step, or find yourself searching outside of you for clarity. Well, this space is here to bring you back inward and ignite your heart and soul once more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mother and intuitive, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello and welcome, friend, into this episode, which I'm so happy to have you here with me for, because we are going to talk about the journey of remembering our worth, of trusting ourselves again, and shedding the conditioning that taught us to seek our value outside of ourselves. My guest today is Monica Rodgers, a coach, podcast host of the Revelation Project, and spiritual practitioner who helps women break free from limiting beliefs and reconnect with their authentic selves. Monica has truly devoted her life to helping women awaken to their truth and reclaim their inner guidance. So it's perfect for this community. And in this episode, we explore the trance of unworthiness that keeps so many of us disconnected from ourselves, how to distinguish intuition from conditioning, fear, and people-pleasing, and what it takes to stop striving, proving, and performing so we can live from a place of authenticity and self-trust. This conversation feels very honest, empowering, and is filled with beautiful reminders that the woman you're becoming isn't someone you need to create. It's someone you're going to remember. So settle in, take a breath, and I hope you enjoy this inspiring conversation between Monica and I. Welcome, Monica. I'm so happy and pleased to have you here today with me.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you. Well, you speak so beautifully in your work about interrupting the trance of unworthiness, which really feels like the heart of what we're going to explore today in our conversation. So I would love to begin there and ask, when you look back on your own life, when did you first realize you had been living inside that trance yourself?
Oh gosh, I would go back about 17 years. I had a dark night of the soul, and I didn't even have language for what that was. In fact, I grew up Catholic, and for your listeners, anybody who's grown up in either high control religion or just in general, we all have kind of our conditioning or our programming. But of course, in my Catholic programming, I wasn't allowed to have any sort of spiritual autonomy, right? It was kind of like I was a bad girl if I questioned who is God and why should I have faith? And, who is this man in the sky? And it wasn't until I was probably in my late 30s and I had done what they say we women can do. I had done all of the pretty pleasing and polite behavior that got me where I was in my life. And I realized that I was deeply unhappy, overwhelmed, exhausted. At that point, I also had two children. I had the big home with the white picket fence. I had what on the outside looked like everybody's dream come true. And yet I had never been more miserable. And so when I call it saying yes to the mess. Is when you stop pretending, and you stop performing that I've got everything handled, and you actually let things start to fall apart. That's where you really start, I believe, answering your soul's call, and you start in many practices or traditions, they might call it the heroine's journey or the dark night of the soul, right? It's you go on an epic journey to figure out who you actually are. And what I came to recognize and realize is that my programming had created kind of this, what I call this trance of unworthiness. So, growing up girl, we all are fed messages from the time we're born, really. It's kind of like death by a thousand tiny paper cuts. We are fed these derogatory messages that tell us to maintain the status quo as women, to stay small, stay uncomplicated, stay quiet, and that's where the three P's come in: pretty, pleasing, polite, and even performative. I've added a fourth P because I find that it's so powerful, right? So many women perform their lives instead of live their lives.
That's incredibly beautiful and so powerful when you start to frame it in that manner and say, really identify, here's what we're facing and here's kind of what we're up against. But then it gives language to, okay, once we understand it, we can start to shift it. So I want to dive into that even more, especially have you really unpack that trance of unworthiness, maybe even deeper, and in the subtle ways. How does that show up in our conscious, in our self awareness, especially for those who even have done a lot of the healing work and inner work and feel like, oh, I'm at a much better place? Where do we need to keep looking to understand that there's probably still this level of unworthiness that we're facing?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many ways. And so we could explore a few, and I'm sure you can also add to this conversation from your own life experience. But for me, I would say there were many indicators. I started realizing that I had many parts of myself. And this is something else that I think we need to normalize. That when we have grown up in an emotionally uninhabitable world, we often escape or evacuate ourselves. We often go up into our heads or leave our bodies and disassociate altogether. And in the shamanistic tradition, when you start doing your heroine's journey, or you begin to become the artist of your own life, or you go on this soul's mission, you do a lot of what's called soul retrieval. So when we say, oh, there's a part of me that really wants to do this, and then there's a part of me that really doesn't, that's also known as parts work. Like, we have these fragmented parts of ourselves that often we've abandoned a long time ago. I have tons of little girl parts of me that I have discovered along the way that have something to say, and so it's very, very important that we as adult women, and all of your listeners and even men, recognize and realize that we are multifaceted beings, and we have these parts of ourselves that all need to belong and become integrated in our journey toward wholeness. And so, some of the signals of the trance of unworthiness are self-abandonment. Did I say yes when I meant no? Did I say no when I meant yes? Hey, Monica, do you need any help with that? No, I got it. I'm fine. Right? It could be that simple, but it's still a form of self-abandonment. Do we catch ourselves performing? Like, I went into the grocery store the other day, and it had been a while since I had been out and about. And I saw like three people, and I realized by the time I left the grocery store, I was like, oh, my face hurts. And it was because I was forcing myself to like smile, and like do the social thing. And I realized, like, okay, it's just those moments where I recognize, like, okay, I had a little bit of a performance there, like, can I breathe, relax into my body, and still be friendly, but come across as more authentic, right? And not abandon myself, like not perform my way through the grocery shopping, you know? So it's really simple, but you start really realizing that there are all of these ways that we do this to ourselves. Can you think of any yourself? Any that kind of resonate for you?
Yeah, it makes me think about for a long time, I really separated my true self from my external self. Of I would abandon who I really was in order to fit in the box that I was expected to fit in. And I got really good at doing that, but it left me feeling very unsteady and confused because I would have to really, yeah, separate those pieces and be like, okay, I'm this Olivia here, and I'm this Olivia here, and I'm this Olivia here. And I think the other piece was around the transition from maiden to motherhood. Of I just completely was like, okay, that Olivia's gone. Now I'm here. And I did threw myself into motherhood, and it was so beautiful and wonderful. But at a certain point, you reckon with, wait, I've left behind aspects of myself. And while I don't feel like it was so much performative or those types of things, I definitely had aspects of it. It was a lot more, I didn't do a good job adjusting, right? When you spoke of those parts of us and you leave certain parts of yourself behind, or they become almost disembodied from you.
Yeah.
That I think I have done a lot of that. And then that led also to numbing and escapism. And I can resonate a lot with that. It took a long journey to heal those parts of myself and be able to sit in that discomfort. So I think I want you to even speak more to that because I think many of us can resonate with that disjunction of parts and that we've separated from.
Yeah, yeah. You said that so beautifully, like the numbing, right? Even addiction, right? Any form of addiction, whether it's a food addiction or a alcohol addiction, there's so many ways to numb ourselves, even social media. So it's really like, starting to ask myself the question, what am I pretending not to know, or what am I avoiding, or what what's wanting to be revealed? And I call my work the Revelation Project because I do believe that everybody's life is their own kind of revelation project. And a revelation is such a beautiful thing when you think about it. It's, kind of something that it occurs to us, or it can happen kind of as like we can begin when we're on our own authentic path. We can start to see synchronicities more and more, right? Where we kind of sometimes that's where we can connect, or at least I can, with the sacred and the divine. I realize that there's divine choreography that's beyond me. I don't know if you're into astrology at all, but for me it's really like understanding part human design and part astrology, and that there's so much of our experience that is still a mystery, but there are often these little kind of like breadcrumbs along the way that the divine is leaving for us. And when we're in alignment, true alignment, and it doesn't mean alignment looks like success. Alignment can look like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling really tender today. I'm feeling really angry today. I'm feeling really reactive today, right? It's being true to what's actually going on. And Olivia, I just want to be clear, when you were saying like talk more about that, do you mean the parts? Do you mean, yeah,
Yeah, I think going into when we are in this state of unworthiness, when we have been conditioned to, go into those four P's, and that's how we start to navigate. Can you speak more to how do we identify that we have those pieces behind? What does that start to feel like? How do we start to reclaim them even to help us along this journey? Or what does that path look like?
yeah. Well, I would say the biggest indicator is the body. And this is where, we hear the buzzword embodiment a lot in the world these days. But what it really means to me is that that's the true barometer is the body. The body is always going to tell us when we're off the mark. The body is usually exhausted by our performance. Like that day in the grocery store, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I need to go take a nap. Like it takes a lot of work to perform, right? And it's not about, it's like, oh, Monica, you're past that. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm still a human being, and I have to kind of like being embodied isn't something that just occurs and then you never have to do it again. It's a practice, especially living in this world. I call this world the upside down. And so, in order for me to re inhabit myself, I need to have a constant dialogue with myself. And it looks something like this. Oh, wow, you were really performing in there. Like, yeah, like notice that. How does that feel? How does that feel in your body? Right? Like, I'm always kind of checking in, like, oh, it actually feels really exhausting. Okay, let's take a breath. Can I forgive myself for, going backwards? Can I acknowledge that, like, that's not really true to who I am? Can I do it differently next time? Right? It's just noticing and then accepting and embracing and just being like, okay, so be it. Right? And really it's this practice of radical self-love, because there's absolutely not a living woman out there that hasn't come by her trance of unworthiness honestly. We've all been programmed and conditioned to perform this life, to be this way. But coming back to ourselves, it's an unbecoming process. It's a process of getting messy and real and honest. I'll give you another example. when all of this went down when I was in my 30s, and I had this big house and this white picket fence and the two children and a dog and a husband, handsome husband, I was also pretending not to know that my marriage wasn't going to work out. I just kept doing the thing that was expected of me. And in the Catholic tradition, you don't get a divorce. And so I could have continued to live from that commitment, that I made, and you hear my voice change because again, that's like an internalized part. That's a voice. It wasn't my voice. It was probably the voice of a Catholic nun, I mean, that was kind of strict and disciplined and told me what I could and could not do. And so, we get to this point in our adult experience where we start to interrogate all of the things we've been taught to believe. And you again start recognizing the trance when you're ashamed for even questioning it, right? Can anybody relate to that? I mean, it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to be questioning. This must mean I'm bad, or this must mean I don't have faith, or this must mean like who could I talk to about this? Like it's shameful, right? So it's all of these ways that we're conditioned to believe that we are or are not based on what out there thinks of us. But what we really want to do is look at ourselves authentically in the mirror and be like, you know what? I love your spunk. I love who you are. We've had hard times and we've fallen apart, but like we love who we are. Like I love who I am. You want to get to the point where you can just be like mess and all, warts and all. I approve.
I love that so much. And I think that's so important. So I want to talk a little bit more about that fear of honoring ourselves because we worry it's going to cost us a relationship or an identity and the certainty of our life. And there's a lot of comfort in the certainty, even if that voice is screaming at you and you know the truth of the matter. How would you recommend us navigating that grief or that disorientation that can come with becoming more authentic? Because I think many of us know what our authenticity is, and yet we still struggle to bring it forward and live a life or make the choices from that space.
Yeah. So one practice is telling the closest truth. There's there's all kinds of truth that we don't tell, but we start by telling the truth closest to us, right? And so if my husband turns to me at night and says, "Is everything okay?" If my always already way of being is like, "Yeah, everything's great." There's this pause between that saying that and what's really true, which is, well, actually, there is something on my mind. Do you have a minute to talk about it? And then whatever is true in that moment and just letting it be there and speaking it without necessarily feeling like it needs to get solved, but just being like, this is a truth. I'm going to honor it in this moment. And we can talk about it later, but I'm just going to bring it to the surface. And there it is again, a revelation. You're revealing something that has been hidden, even from you,
Yes.
right? And it's so simple that it almost feels like too simple. But when we think about how many times we step over the truth closest to us on a day to day basis, we will find that in that small space of pause is a truth that we could have said that would have actually brought us closer to authenticity versus more distant from it. And every time we step over it, we abandon ourselves. And it's a practice, right? It only takes a few times of like repetition to start getting into the hang of it. And the thing that we need to catch ourselves in is the spiraling, the shame spiraling, or the like, oh my God, I just like the shock of hearing the truth come out of you, right? Because for so many of us, we've been operating based on the patriarchal program and the patriarchal programming and the patriarchal pace. And so when we change that programming and we change that pace and we start to honor our own pace and our own program, we are going to be disruptive. And I can't guarantee to anybody that's listening that it's not going to disrupt your marriage, that it's not going to disrupt your life. But hopefully, the goal is always that alignment and authenticity brings you closer to the life that's actually destined for you, not the one that you're pretending and performing, right? And so people have lost sight of the fact that there's magic in the world, but that's because they're not in alignment. When you're in alignment, everything shows up magically because you're now in alignment with the truth. And so the truth of what's meant for you is going to rush towards you. And the right people are going to show up. When I think about how long I kept toxic friends in my life because they were, even though they made me feel miserable, right? And so many women can relate to this. We perform in our friendships a lot. And I think like to start honoring ourselves and to also recognize that there are some friendships that are here for a lifetime and there are some friendships that are just here for a season. And we can bless them and send them on their way and just, with boundaries, right? Like figure out who really belongs in our lives and who doesn't, that too becomes kind of this life-giving, nurturing, magical place where new partnerships can grow and new collaborations. And I just find that when women are honoring themselves in that way and they come together truthfully, that so much more is available to us.
Okay, yes. And I want you to speak more about how can we start to find more alignment and that magic that exists versus when you said the word solve, that just light bulb went off in the sense of so many of us are operating from a space of solving. We are trying to solve our emotions, solve our feelings, solve our marriage, solve everything that is not okay. But when we are in that state, we are missing a large piece of really reality that is so beautiful right in front of us. There's so much there. And yes, there's things to solve, but I think we get caught. We get caught in that loop and that performance to just make everything right and then we will be okay.
Mhm.
Versus like what you're saying is I think the goal should actually be how do we get closer to our truth and step more into alignment in our lives? How does one actually start to shift that narrative and that conditioning towards that?
Yeah, well, first it's also really recognizing like what's mine and what's not mine, right? And that can be tricky for a lot of women, like you said, because we're programmed to fix everybody and fix everything. And so it's a beautiful thing when a woman stops rushing in to solve it. You know, I'll give you a great example. Kind of like where I'm at right now, because I find that like relevant, timely examples, like I'm never done doing this work, right? And so both my kids are home from college, and so I sat everybody down and, I was like, hey, I have this new idea and I want to do a dinner plan. Everybody choose a night, they're old enough. I'm like, spend up to $30 in groceries. You have one night a week and everybody take a turn to do their dinner night, and it's been like everything for me to just like not, especially with my boy, right, is to not like come home and save him from his from his dinner night, you know what I mean, and let him figure it out. I mean, my son is almost 21 years old, and like so many of us who can relate to like boys kind of being a little bit more like lackadaisical, right? It's like, I'm all like, oh my God, is he going to leave the burner on? Is he going to this? Is he going to that? But it's like, I cannot micromanage him, right? And I have to realize like that's his to learn. So what can I do, Monica? Well, I can stay late at the studio that night and I can text me 20 minutes before dinner is on the table so that I don't go home and fix it, so that I don't go home and make sure he does it right. Right. So there are things like this where you have to really identify like, what can I do to help myself to, you know, recognize that this work is mine and this work is theirs, right? And so there are so many ways that this shows up in a woman's life, whether it's taking, right? It's what's the expression? If you want it done right, do it yourself. We have to let people do it their way. And we have to let people make their own mistakes. And then we have to let them, the consequences arrive from them doing it their way, right? We have to learn to step back and radically approve of us stepping back and radically approve of the mess that happens over there, and just be like, yes, and be able to be with the discomfort of it all, our own nervous system, and the perception of like, oh God, what's going to happen over there if I don't rush in to fix it? And it really is this constant, like I said before, this inner dialogue that you have to have with yourself. Like, it's okay. Oh, wow, that looks like a train wreck. I approve, right? It's okay. It's like really, really practicing this radical self approval and radical approval for like big messes. It's like maybe this is what it looks like when it's all working out. My son's name is Shaw, right? Maybe Shaw has a God and it's not me. What if I stopped, being his God?
Yes. Who would he become?
Who
What
would
would
he
he
become?
become?
What would he become? Yeah. And it is a hard habit to stop. I'm not going to lie. It's a hard habit to stop, but we must stop. We must stop because I believe that the world is the way it is because women haven't stepped away yet.
It's so true. We are in this extreme oversight, right? We've tried to step away from the patriarchy, step away from the authority, but then we've become it in this odd way ourselves. We've somewhat replaced that in our life and in those around us, versus it makes me think of that grandmother energy where it's a separation that is able to take where you are able to allow the children to, explore, and you don't have so much stress and like, let me do that for you. And oh my gosh, be careful. All those little micromanaging that we've gotten so unfortunately ingrained to do. And it's like, can we remember the beauty of allowing things to unfold, of the surrendering, of holding that space and being that strength and being that comfort as we are supposed to, but removing ourselves from having to be perfect, make our life perfect. Because one of the things it's making me think of is, especially being a new mom, once again, I've been on some of like the mother messaging boards. And one of the topics that blew up was around the resentment that women are carrying because they
Oh,
are doing everything.
they're
Because
doing it
they,
all.
yes. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that is what this is speaking to so deeply because I've thought about that question of, how do we shift out of that? How do we shift out of that space of being the one that's on and then carrying that weight of the world? It's something I struggle with immensely. So I'd love you to maybe speak into this topic of what would you recommend? And I almost think it starts to come to that discernment of reprogramming our mind. And when that's coming up, how do we step away or really look at what's in front of us?
Okay. Okay. So, a couple of tools. The first one is the I approve tool, right? And you'd be shocked. Like, no kidding. Um, if you have a good cry at some point or blow up and have a temper tantrum, I just want you to put your hand on your heart next time this happens and just be like, I approve. It's not to justify your behavior, but it's just to like, instead of going into a shame spiral, instead of going into like, oh my God, blah, 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 what's wrong with me? All the things we do and say, right? Just be like, I approve. Okay. So that's tool number one. Tool number two, when it comes to other people and other people doing things, like my son with dinner, right? Blah, blah, blah. Mom, I don't know. I don't, this, that, or the other thing. I'm not sure how to. Shaw, you've got this. Olivia, you've got this, right? Instead of me going over there and fixing it, me recognizing that why am I going over there to fix it? I don't trust that they can do it. How arrogant is that? That's arrogance. That's actually arrogance. So when we can start to realize that like what's operating in the background sometimes is like or the inconvenience, right, of letting somebody do it in a way that's not your way, also arrogance, also controlling, right? It's just like start practicing saying like or a friend, right, who wants to trauma dump on you again, right? Holly, you've got this. Yeah, I know this is tough, but you've got this, right?
Mm.
Like it's just such a beautiful way to create a boundary without creating a rift
Yes, and or stepping into self, right? Like you're
or
saying.
stepping in. So you're doing the
Yes.
boundaries, and a no out there is a yes for you,
Hmm.
right? So it's learning like, how can I teach my children to trust themselves by telling them you've got this? I don't know
Yes.
how you've got this. I don't know
But
how
you
you got
will.
yourself into this, but you've got this. It's like, where do we lose discernment and then creating a failsafe or a catchphrase that we can begin to use that deprograms us? But we're the deprogrammers, we're the debuggers.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
be in
you
this
have
world.
to
You
be.
have to be. You have to be the one
Yeah.
that's realizing and not in a way to, again, solve, but to make life better. So that brings me to, you said it a few times, allowing life's messes. So, how do we get comfortable with that? Speak to that phrase and really your philosophy around that. And how do we settle in that? Because I think we are through social media, through again this need for authority and everything perfect. I think we've got nervous systems that can't settle until everything is in its place and all is well, and we take that on versus stepping away and allowing life's messes. So I'd love to hear what you have to say around it.
Yeah. So I speak a lot to shamanism because I think that we're in an era where we all have to recognize that what a shaman is an artist of their own life. Like, and in order to be an artist, you have to be messy. In order to be creative and to have creative brilliance, you have to be able to say yes to the mess. And some of the most powerful wisdom teachers on the planet would say things like, no mud, no lotus. You cannot have a beautiful life without having the other aspects of it. And it's more about the allowing and the approval. Again, when something happens, like Monica drops a bowl on the floor and breaks it, right? It's like, just okay, say yes to the mess, not I guess this is the way it's going to be today, or right. Like I have a choice in every moment, and my words create worlds, right? And so, what I want to do is I want to speak truthfully and powerfully at all times. And I want to be able to create with my words. And so, there's so much beauty in the mess. I mean, we give intimacy a lot of lip service, but we don't really know what it is. Intimacy is transparency. When we're willing to say, intimacy, when we're willing to say, look at me, look at my mess, look at my vulnerabilities, look at like all of these human deficits I have. Aren't they beautiful? Like, along with all of my gifts, right? Like, have you ever met a woman that can't take a compliment?
Hmm.
Okay, how annoying is that? Right? Like, it's so unsatisfying to compliment a woman and to have her self depreciate, right? And vanish when you're calling her forward, when you're like, oh my God, like, I see your brilliance, I see your beauty. Instead, right, she'll be like, oh my God, like, oh, I'm a mess today. And like, we watch each other do it all the time, right? It's like, these are the powerful places where I'm asking us to notice and change our behavior. And so if I were to say to you, you're an incredible podcaster, like it actually takes courage and grace and guts and to do this work. It's like you could just as easily say thank you, it's true,
Mm.
right? And not shirk and not shrink and not go away. You could actually like take that
Yeah.
in.
That's so beautiful. And I want to speak more into that intimacy that you're talking about because it's something I've never really thought about. But That I think is at a core one of those big roots that needs tending as women, of really understanding what does intimacy actually feel and look like, and how does intimacy play a role in living a more aligned, authentic life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing I want to say about intimacy is that safety and intimacy go side by side. Okay. But if you're safe with you, you've got intimacy, no matter where you are and no matter who you're with. If you're safe with you. Now, if you're not safe with the person you're with and you don't want to be intimate with them, then you probably shouldn't have them in your life. I mean, hard truth. But if you want to learn intimacy and you believe it's possible to have intimacy, like for instance with your husband, right? Or the people closest to us that we think we have intimacy with, but we actually don't, then the thing we get really good at is modeling what it looks like to fuck up and to then be like, I'm going to love myself anyway, or I'm going to apologize for the mess I made. And then I'm going to keep going on with my day because it doesn't mean anything about me as a person or us in this relationship. I'm just a human being doing the best I can, right? And so we make it into this big thing because we're often trying to be right. But we can either be right or we can be in relationship. We can't be both. So you have to kind of again look at the programming behind underneath the surface. It's like we've been programmed to be that way, right? In order to maintain control or power. But it's usually not in our best interest. And it's usually creating harm and mischief in other places. And so the places where you want to have more transparency and more intimacy, then that's the truth closest to you right now, right? And so you might want to say those words out loud to the person you love. I want to create more intimacy in our relationship, but I know it starts with me. So you start modeling truth. You start modeling what's true for you.
Yes. And it makes me think about how I think many of us want such a meaningful, magical life. And we know that's possible. A lot of us are living that, especially those listening here. We are deeply intuitive and imaginative, and we follow the pings and we look for the signs and synchronicities. And yet we still feel lost or like we're not on the path or our life isn't changing. And what I'm realizing with you speaking is I think we're placing meaning in the wrong things. We are attempting to make something that feels more meaningful, and yet we are trapped in putting meaning in these places that are eroding our confidence, eroding that intimacy, eroding those spaces that would allow us to shift. And I think for me, it's really that mess. I need to settle into more mess. But what do you have to say to that?
Oh my gosh, I just love that revelation and that insight so much because it's exactly right. It's like we are undermining the beauty that is right here, right now, simply because we're not willing to be vulnerable and messy and human. But my God, that is the very definition of being human. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to also reference my Catholic upbringing because it might not resonate for everybody. I kind of veered away from Catholicism and I started to really get interested, as I've spoken of, not only in shamanism, but in the sacred feminine. And what I've come to learn about the sacred feminine is that what that was really, for me at least, all about, because I think everybody has their own personal invitation and experience of what that all is to them. But they say that Jesus and Mary were a couple, right, and walked this earth. But I think what they were modeling was this sacred masculine, sacred feminine, not that she held one or the other, but that they both held both, right? That they were both and the both and, or what I call the sacred and, is that the closer we get to our humanity is the closer we get to our divinity. That humanity is messy and uncertain and full of mistakes. but that's exactly, I think, what they were modeling. You know, they weren't modeling perfection. They were modeling the messy truth and the suffering of being human. And in that suffering, they were also divine. And that this was the message that they had for us as human beings. Not only the message of you're being programmed, by the Roman Empire, this is, blah, 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 is all bullshit, right? Like that was a very true message too. But it was like, you have the power within you to be both and.
Mm.
But the more we step over it, the more we're just performing our programming, the more we're enslaved to this patriarchal culture, and the more we live in the upside down. Right? It's
Yes.
like it's like what we want to do is we want to re-inhabit ourselves. We want to dare to be here now, dare to get transparent, dare to dream about what's possible when we stop pretending to have it all handled and show up messy, show up as we are and just approve of it.
Own it, be
Own
there,
it.
like just own who we are. Is there anything that you feel the sacred feminine or the sacred masculine or even anything in shamanism that would be helpful to those listening and especially around this conversation and the state of the world and where we're at right now that you see we need to recapture more? Is there anything there to teach us? I think a lot of us know and talk about these aspects, but how do we actually bring that into practicality and like day-to-day living?
Okay. I don't know why, but what is actually coming to me is laughter. I think the human population has forgotten that the best medicine is laughter. We take it all so seriously. And honestly, it is serious and it's not, right? It's like using that sacred and to kind of let the contradictory stand together versus push one aside is the key, where we can say, I'm messy and magnificent. I'm both and, right? And look at the things that we can't handle today and just see the humor in it because it's never ending. I mean, you cannot make this shit up, the stuff that's happening in the world, right? And so we can get all scared and paralyzed and, chew our nails or whatever we do to like cope, or we can just learn to like self manage in a way that gives us like, okay, I'm not going to look at social media today and I'm going to go, hang out with some friends who make me laugh, or I'm going to notice the absurdity in this moment and just have a good belly laugh and know that that is the most powerful medicine and is actually like akin with enlightenment. They talk about lighten up for a reason, right? Like that's an expression, lighten up, because when we're so heavy and dense and disassociated, we're not living. We're not alive. We're not aware of the beauty and magic that's here right now. And so that's what comes to me is like everything that you've been taught, like instead of see it to believe it to see it. Like start turning things on their heads. Let the miracle chase you instead of you chasing it. Right? Like all of these ways that we have these expressions that we say day after day and don't ever question, start questioning them.
Right. To your
You know,
point, if we're in the upside down, can we start to flip things on their head and start to see them? Because I do think these teachings are hidden. They're hidden within this and they're distorted because they want to keep us where we are and enslaved and in their power. But we are here to awaken into our power. And so, can we start to realize that? And is there anything you want to share on that front before I ask you more questions?
well, just that, change can be scary and it can be painful. I'm not going to lie, but like everybody avoids pain, but the cure for the pain is inside the pain. We run from the pain versus just being with it. And I have this great little antidote or story. My husband and I we started going to couples therapy a few years ago. And we had this thing where it was like a pattern. And for 17 years, we had this same pattern. I would get upset and he would disassociate. And then I would get mad and I would be like, ba, 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 and come at him even more, which would only make him go further away. And so I'll never forget this one time we're at couples therapy and I'll just call him Dan. He said, Monica, how are you feeling? And I said to Dan how I was feeling. And he looks at Austin. He goes, Austin, what did you just hear Monica say? And Austin goes, I don't know. And he goes, well, where were you? He goes, I guess I wasn't here. And he goes, okay, can you stay here and listen to how Monica feels? And so we tried again. And then Dan says to Austin, okay, Austin, what did you hear Monica say? And he turns to me and he tells me what I said and mirrors me. And I said, yes, thank you. And Dan goes, how does that feel, Monica? And I said, I feel really seen and heard right now. And Austin looked incredulous and he looks at Dan and he says, is this what I've been bracing against my whole life?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Right? It's like it's that simple. It's like we forget that we have to be with somebody in their pain in order for them to feel seen, loved, and heard. But that also includes us. We have to be with ourselves in our own pain in order to feel seen, loved, and heard by ourselves. It goes both with individual, me to me, and me with other people. I don't have to fix them. I just have to hear them and mirror them.
That's what I was going to say because it made me immediately think we're so quick to solve to, oh, I hear that. And then here's your 5 step point process to go fix that. Whereas in reality, we just want to be heard. We just want to be seen. We just want to be honored in the mess, in the feelings, in the, oh, that's hard. The best advice I got out of all my friends that I talked to as I was returning to my work from postpartum was I had one friend who just said, Olivia, I could tell you so many things, but all I'm going to say is that's hard and that's going to
Mhm,
be hard. And can you
mhm,
sit with that and
mhm,
let it be hard and just know
mhm.
that that's a season and then it'll shift and something else will be hard, but other things will be easy and that's okay. And it just allowed me to be like, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
just witnessing and affirming my feelings. Whereas most of my other friends, while we're so supportive and sweet, were, like giving me advice and all these things, but it just, the snowball kept running. It didn't allow those feelings to find a place to settle. It just fueled the fire of my worries. Whereas the honoring of the reality that I was facing allowed it to settle and allowed me to go, wow, I'm going to be okay. And this is okay.
Yes. Yes. And she normalized that, right? She was like, yes, hard truth. And there are hard truths. And that's okay, right?
Yes.
And it's kind of like she also said, you've got this.
Exactly. Yeah, she did. She said it with so much love and knew I could take that and knew I was able to handle that. And it makes me think too. So I want to keep talking about this, but you also talk a lot about how creativity can start to help us on this path, can help us start to get back into our own truth and that messiness and allowing that. Can you speak to how does creativity and embodying that and getting messy really help us on this path to reclaim ourselves, to reclaim this vulnerability and shift things in our day to day?
Yeah. Well, if you're somebody who's listening that has a desire, whether it's to paint or draw or learn an instrument or dance or write whatever the thing is, you are for sure going to meet your disapproving parts when you go to do that because you're not going to be perfect at it. And by the way, that's another P, right, for women is perfectionism. And when we can't be perfect at something, we usually take our ball and go home or we berate ourselves through to get to mastery. And I don't know about you, but like I'm kind of done with that. And I say that, and yet I took a 6 month sabbatical 2 years ago, which is, just funny at this point to say it like that, to go back to art school. And if I thought I had done parts work before, right? Systems family work and kind of like understanding all of these parts of the human psyche, I never got so intimate with it until I started painting on a canvas. And oh my God, all of the inner critics that still had a voice and that were disintegrated all came out like a bad gang in a bad neighborhood. They were all over me. And so it's like, Ah, my gosh, talk about just the adventure. And that's just it, too. I kept reminding myself, Monica, this is an adventure. You haven't picked up a paintbrush since you were 19 years old. And even if you had, yes to bad art every day, yes to the struggle, yes to the moments of freedom and flow that start to show up when you dare to do something different, and you dare to learn something different. You learn about new parts of yourself and encounter you encounter that soul part that really came here to express itself, right? And so art is some sort of self expression, right? And I had mentioned earlier that we can also be the artists of our own lives with our words, with how we're creating. It's really about the level of consciousness that you want to bring to your own life. And I feel like for me, yes, it's drawing and painting and continuing to give myself full permission for however that shows up and however difficult, it feels to me. I was in a group. I love doing art classes with elders, and I was with a group of 70 and 80-year-old women yesterday, and I loved being there so much. And I just kept giving myself permission. They were all really, really master painters. I mean, I've been at it for, like I said, 2 years, but sporadically, right? And I just kept giving myself permission to just be bad at it, and just know that, like, if I was in approval, everything was going to work out. And it did, and it was so interesting because we all hung our paintings at the end of the class. And the most master, the one that had the most degrees in painting was like, I love that one. And she pointed to mine. And she was like, that one's the most alive. And then when I said what I had been feeling, that I had been fighting myself all, morning and just continued to try to be in self approval, and really just notice this part of me that was like so afraid to not be perfect with all these other masterly painters, that she was like, a lot of what they say in the arts is like, the more trained you are, the more conditioned you are, the less you're actually able to create from this super authentic place. And so it was just, again, this lesson for me that my perspective on my own, it's none of my business, right? It's like my perspective on myself is not accurate and it's not helpful a lot of times. And just go with it, right? Like just give yourself that gift of full permission and let yourself be messy as hell and just see what happens. Because again, back to that lotus quote, no mud, no lotus. When I really think about that story deeper, that thing is down in the depths of the dark, brackish water. And it keeps like growing toward the light. It starts down there in that dark, dark, dark place. And it finds the light eventually and it blooms into this gorgeous lotus. And it's just, these metaphors are everywhere, but I do think like we are missing out as women the more we're not in touch with this messy feminine side of ourselves, because the feminine is nothing if not messy, and I approve. Emotional, intuition, right? Like all of it unpredictable, highly, refined nervous system that can feel everything. I mean, we are the world's oracle. We are oracular beings as women, and that is messy work. And so we're just learning how to accept ourselves in all of our gifts and all of our shortcomings. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yes, I want you to speak to that a little bit of being the oracle, because I really think that what kept coming up and what I kept hearing with your story was we have the possibility to weave worlds through our words, through our expression, through our being. And that is what we're supposed to be doing here. And I think that can mean a lot of different things to every person, but we've been stuck in painting inside these boxes. And what I realized when you stated that story is we are trying to step outside of that. But it's really hard. It's really uncomfortable. We're really confused by it. So we doubt ourselves. So we play small. We stay in that perfect box that we know is accepted. But there is
Mhm.
something really magical and beautiful that is possible when we start to step outside of that and allow ourselves to weave something that hasn't been done or hasn't been seen, or we don't know where that's even going to land or if it will at all. But it's this expression that we are so capable of holding, and that draws people, I think, to your work, to my work, where we know that that is possible, but we're like, how, or how do we start?
Well, there's a quote that I love, and I wish I remembered the author, but she said, "There is a path to the mystery, and as I walk, it's revealed to me, the deep, the dark, the way." And when I don't know where I'm going, that's exactly what I say to myself is like, there is a path to the mystery. As I walk, it's revealed to me. I'm not going to know. And that's what we have to recognize as women, as oracular women, is that the world reveals itself to us as we walk forward, as we step into what's true for us. Like open sesame, that world does not open unless we are in co creative partnership with that mystery. Because we are the mystery women. We embody the mystery and we are in co active partnership with the void or the mystery or the unknown, whatever you want to call it. And so I won't sit here and pretend that I know the journey. I only know my journey, right? And Olivia, you're the only one that knows your journey. And every single woman listening here has her own individual journey that's meant just for her. And the only way you're going to know is by taking step after step forward, right? And it's going to reveal itself to you. And that's your revelation project.
I think that's a beautiful spot to possibly end this conversation on. You're so right that we each have our own journey, our own revelation project that's going to take us where we are meant to be. And I think there truly is that. There is meaning, there is fate and destiny and all those things mixed together, but you have to be willing to show up and listen, to show up and hear those nudges and be willing to participate and be willing to get messy and try again. And this conversation was so impactful. I loved it so deeply. So I just want to
Me
say
too.
thank you. Thank you for being willing to go there and being willing to help us start to shift our programming, shift our perspective, and say, dare to live, dare to show up. My initial podcast was called Live Wildly with the tagline, Dare to Live Wildly, right?
Oh,
Dare
yeah.
to
Yeah.
live. And I think that just resonates and really is at a root of where my heart's at and where your heart's at. So thank you again so much.
Oh my gosh. And likewise, Olivia, just keep doing what you're doing because you're brilliant at it. Your voice is so needed, in the world, and you're so good at what you do. So thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be here, and I've just loved having this conversation.
Oh, you're so welcome, Monica. It's been a delight to connect. This is what lights me up. And before I let you go, will you please share with my listeners what you have going on and where they can find you?
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, so your listeners can go visit my website. It's jointherevelation.com. And I would point you towards two things. One is actually a repository or a library of past podcast episodes. Many, many are about excavating and reclaiming the sacred feminine. And then the other thing I have is a free gift for your listeners, and it's called the Women's Bill of Rights. And I wrote it for myself after my dark night of the soul. And it was to remind myself that I have the right to be messy and magnificent, that I have the right to make mistakes and fail and still be nominated for the position or the job, right? Like it's like that. It's like a poem, but it's also like a manifesto of permission and approval. And I usually say to women, go ahead, download it, read it, but write one for yourself because that was for me personally. And while I find it resonates for so many women, I just want to honor that every woman has her own internal bill of rights and what's right for her. And in a way, it helps break the trance or the spell, the patriarchal spell. because it's really about breaking the bullshit rules. They're bullshit. They're
They
bullshit
are.
rules.
And we need almost permission. I think that's a lot of what the work we do is to give each other permission because otherwise it feels scary. It feels like, should I, and that's, we need to get out of that mindset, but we can help each other in that way. So I will link everything of yours in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for offering that and doing the beautiful
Thank
work
you.
that you do.
Yes, likewise. And just keep going. You've got this.
Oh, thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm truly grateful you chose to spend this time with me and be a part of this community. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to leave a rating and written review because it helps Intuition Unlocked reach more women who are ready to live clearer, bolder, and more self-led. As a thank you, screenshot your review and email it to me, and I'll send you a resource to support your next step. And until next time, root into your truth, rise into your power, and radiate your light.